Okay, today we're going to talk about backing up our data. Specifically, we're going to be making some SQL files for archive purposes, for backup, whatever you want to do with them. We begin, of course, in the Office folder, and we'll just start with what every Office file has, include sitelogin.php. Now I'm going to begin with, if there's not a table, then let's get a table. So the get table function. Of course, I think we did this previously in a different assignment, but we're going to get a form to choose, method post, and we'll select the table, name equals table, and what we're doing here in the SQL is just show tables. And we get a result set, and of course that's what it would look like in MySQL if we had a result set. And we're going to say while row equals MySQL fetch array. A lot of times we do MySQL fetch associate, but array will allow us to do by number rather than by name. You can do either actually, but row 0, and we're going to take that in option value so that we can then, when we go and click on the download table, we find a pick list of all the possible tables. We choose that table, and now what we're going to do is we're going to send that to a function called downloaded. Well, we got a little bit to do there. First of all, I'm going to begin with a function called create string, where I take the table name and send it to create string. Now what I'm doing in create string is I'm going to describe the table. And as I pointed out, column 0, when you do MySQL fetch array, the first column is column 0, the second column is column 1. So I just want to go and fetch that information. So I'm going to get a result set and begin while row equals MySQL fetch row. Okay, now that's not MySQL fetch array, it's MySQL fetch row. The difference is row, you have to use 0 and 1. You have to use the numbers. MySQL fetch associate, you use the name. And MySQL fetch array, you can use either. So I chose MySQL fetch row just so I could point that out. And what it does here, if you echo that out to the screen, after you choose an event or a table, you'll see the ID field, title, start date, end date, whatever the fields are, and their property, that is the second column. You notice the ID says int 11. It doesn't say primary key, not null, auto increment, because those are from other fields. Now, what I've decided to do is eliminate the ID part, because I am going to give that the special name. We already know every one has that. So it says, well, if it's not equal to ID, then let's print it out, in other words. So we've skipped the ID field at this point in time. You notice after article text, there is a comma there. We're going to have to deal with that at some point. So what I'm going to do is add in front of answer, instead of having it be nothing to begin with, it says create table, whatever the table name is, ID, int, primary key, not null, auto increment, comma, and then we get all the rest of the array. Now, at the end, to get rid of that, answer equals substring answer comma 0 comma string length of answer minus 2, and then add to it. Now this is kind of interesting what it adds to it. It adds a parenthesis, and I've got a pipeline here. Now normally I use a semicolon. By the end of this video, I'll explain why you can't use the semicolon and why you're going to use the pipeline. But what it does is it takes off that last comma and adds the parenthesis and the pipeline. So what I've done is I've just built a create string that will create that table's structure. Now, before I do that, I usually have a drop table if exists in the name of the table. So now I've got the first two lines of recreating the data. And when we take a look at that, we can see it. Now I've got semicolons at the end of these lines because that's what we typically do in prior SQL statements, but again, we're going to explain that a little later. So moving on, what I need to do is what's called the start string, because that's the part where it says insert into table name, and then it takes all the names of the fields in parentheses, then it has at the end the word values. So you can see I've got a loop going that as long as it's not ID, it'll list that name. Let's take a look and see if we can see what that says. It says insert into events, title, start date, end date, article ID, article values. So it's got everything but ID, just like we normally would have. So that's the start of every single insert statement that we have. Now when we look at the events table, we find all the fields, and you notice ID happens to be first, although it doesn't necessarily have to be first. It might be, it might not be. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that start string in the table and we're going to go to a function called getData. It's going to get all the data that goes with that. So we begin by describing that table and getting the results there, because we want to know the fields. And if row ID equals 0, then answer equals X. Oh, what we're doing here is we got to know which, because we're not sure really which field the ID one is, of the 5 or 6 fields, we need to know which one of those is ID. Normally ID is written first, but it doesn't have to be. It could be anywhere. So just out of safety's sake, we're going to describe the table, go through and find out which one of those fields is named ID, and then we're going to return that number. That way, when we get back to get data, we're going to know the number of fields there are, okay, with the numFields function that just returns the number of fields, and then we know which one is the ID field, so that when we do a while statement, we can add the start string, and if the current row is not equal to ID, then it will add some stuff to this. And when I say stuff, I mean it'll have a single quote, add slashes to the row of $X, and then another single quote. If it's the last one, however, that's when we're going to put the parenthesis at the end of it, so that it'll close parenthesis. Of course, if it isn't the last one, we would put a comma there to separate. Now, when you first look at that, it looks pretty messy because all I have is all that data sitting on the screen. So let me go back in. I'm going to add a couple of BRs at the end of this, just temporarily, so you can see it better. Now you can see each one of these insert statements have been separated by a space so that you can see what we've got going here. I won't keep that, of course. So when I get back to my download table, all I'm really going to have is first, I drop the table, I get the create string, I get the start string, and then from there I get the data. At that point, my SQL backup data is equal to those 3 strings put together. Now, I mentioned that we need to have the pipeline, and that has to do with what will happen when I send all this. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that data and I'm going to put it in a form. As you can see, I have a form. The action is going to be download.php, so it's a separate file name, not the current file name, and I can explain that. But I have a table named $table, and I have an all data, which is the add slashes of all that SQL backup. You notice we're going to submit, and so what it's going to do is it's going to take all that data and submit it to the download.php file. The download.php file is going to be a special file that you'll use to download, and it will look like this when you're just sitting there. It'll have just the button, and when you click on that button, it'll go to the download.php file where it takes that data. And you notice I have a header string, which is going to be content type application / octet stream, and then I have the content disposition attachment file name equals, and then it echoes all the data. That's how we're going to download that data into a text file or whatever I decided to call it. In this case, I have it at .txt. Now, I have to use a different file name, because had we used the original download table file, it would have sent header information already. This one just sends the header information of the content type, content disposition, and then all the data. So this is what it's going to look like when you click on that, and it gives you in this case I had chosen as part of the name of the file to be today's date and the name of the table. And when you open that, you can open it up into Notepad. But when you look at that file, what you'll notice actually is all that red, which clearly is not going to work. And the problem comes in is it's the semicolon. That's what's causing all that red. So the drop table if exists events semicolon is causing problems. So what I have to do is take wherever I had normally wanted a semicolon, I'll turn that into a pipeline. That's what I was saying about doing that in all those places, because the pipeline is also a delimiter. And at that point, you'll notice it's all blue when I look at that data. So that's exactly what I want in order to be able to download it. So I can download it, open it, and if I wanted to paste it back into my database, of course I can do that with the SQL upload that we already created. And when I do that, what happens is it wouldn't work unless I add one more line which says, if there's a pipeline there, replace it with a semicolon, because we had already used the semicolon as the way to explode the ARR SQL array. So before we explode that, we just say, hey, if you had a pipeline, replace it with a semicolon, and it'll work.